And we are discussing what it's like to be a psychopath or live with a psychopath. Not talking about a criminal one at all, just somebody whose brain is configured differently. We're very grateful to Athena Walker, who's in the States, for her time describing her life as a psychopath, which sounds, in many ways like an ordinary life like lots of us lead, Athena.
It's quite ordinary, I think. I would agree with you.
But you really tempted me just before the record where you said that you'd been with this psychologist and she said, okay, Athena, let's take the mask off and get down to it. And when you did, she couldn't handle it. And I'm thinking, I've got to, as the interviewer, I have to say, can't you take the mask off for me now? Let's see what it's about.
That would, it's a little bit more involved than that. And it would take so much time for me just taking the mask off simply doesn't translate well in just a few minutes. It's something that's it's the amount of time around me, because all it would really seem to be right now would be more blunt answers and less emotive tone in my voice and things of that nature.
Yeah,
it was the long-term exposure when she would ask me questions and I would respond, and it was very blunt and it was very without consideration for how it might make her feel.
Right,
and that was what she couldn't deal with.
Yes, I wondered if it might be sort of a blunter. We're all a bit political, aren't we? And maybe if you really indulge in your psychopathy, you aren't political. You just say whatever you're thinking.
Yeah, that would be basically the case. Yes,
yeah,
and
brutal.
It would be. It is brutal, I suppose, because people really do like to. People who think they want honesty most of the time do not.
Okay, yes, you're so right. That's life. Nicola in Norwich has called us. So we got our callers from around the UK calling in. Nicola says, I was married to a psychopath, but I didn't know it at the time. I'm now divorced. He manipulated his children. He turned them against me. He would make me feel I was the person in the wrong all the time. Does that sound right, Athena?
It sounds an awful lot like the sort of mentality that you get off of sites like Love Fraud and things of that nature that sort of conflate psychopathy, narcissism, sociopathy, and really what those come down to is that's just bad behavior by a person. Anyone could behave in that sort of way. Psychopathy is quite rare. So, I mean, less than 0.75% to 1%. So the chances that the person is psychopathic is quite low, but the chances that they were just sort of a jerk are quite high.
But I'm guessing there are advantages here. You could, for example, if you served in the military, if you weren't hurt physically, you could come back from a war zone. You would never have PTSD, for example, would you?
No, we are quite PTSD resistant. And actually, the military is a place that psychopaths do tend to excel in. We can be very motivated to be cooperative in situations in which we feel that we are achieving. So Special Forces is a great example. Lawyers are another good example. Another place you'll find a lot of psychopaths would be media, television, radio.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting.
I'm the other side. I got too much empathy, so I need a bit more of the psychopath. Okay, we got a caller on the line. Sam Brewer in Skipton. You are a little bit worried, Sam, that you may be a psychopath.
I'm not worried that I'm a psychopath, because I see it in a lot of old bosses that I've worked for in the past. They've had psychopathic tendencies, and that's pushed them forward in the business because the lack of empathy has been able to improve the profit margins because they don't have to think of the downsides of the people that they're hurting.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as a disadvantage, but I don't know if I'm psychopathic or autistic, that it's that inability to read people and to put a mask on, as you're saying.
So, Sam, I gather your girlfriends, when they split up with you, they always say, I'm sorry, but you are a psychopath. Is that what they say?
And that lady that you just had text in, I think that's an easy out to say, I think my husband might have been a psychopath.
Yes, I actually agree.
Okay, let's let Athena come in, because there's a gap on the line, Sam. So let me just get a comment from Athena on that.
I actually agree with him. I think that tends to be the case, that people do use psychopathy or narcissism as an out when a relationship goes badly. And yes, a lack of empathy can certainly be very, very beneficial in business terms. And in fact, about 6%, according to Kevin Dutton's study, of the CEOs in major corporations are psychopathic because the traits are quite beneficial in that realm.
And Athena, I realised that when I asked Sam the question, are you worried you're a psychopath, you would have laughed at that, because if Sam is a psychopath, he by definition wouldn't be worried about it.
That's quite true, and he actually responded quite accurately that I'm not worried about it. Well, that's quite true, because we wouldn't worry about it. It's not something that's concerning at all. It's just something that you understand. When you understand it, you understand it.
Sure. Sam, if you saw somebody on one of your building sites die in front of you, would you feel sorry for them?
Of course I would, which leads me to think that I'm more autistic than psychopath, and I can't read people's emotions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steve, for your call. Fascinating. Anonymous email from somebody who says, this is a man. I had a relationship with a woman who turned out to be a psychopath. She seemed okay for a while, but then it all changed. I've no doubt that if things had gone on, one of us would be dead. 13 years ago I've still got nightmares about the whole thing. I've never been so terrified in my life. But there, Athena, I'm thinking we're into the movies. We're into The Shining and all that, aren't we?
It does sound quite dramatic, doesn't it? I don't know what his circumstances were, so I can't comment whether or not he was in a relationship with a psychopath, but it is a very dramatic sort of interpretation of a relationship to say that I think that we would both be dead. We are often painted as villains. It's the normal narrative. We're cannibals, we're villains, we're super geniuses. We have all these sort of Hollywood traits that people think of when they think of psychopathy, and really we're quite average. We're quite ordinary people.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Honestly, one of the most fascinating conversations, Athena. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure, Jeremy.
Thank you.
It was an absolute pleasure, Jeremy. Thank you.
Come in and see us in London if you're ever passing.
I certainly will.
Thank you. Athena Walker, a psychopath who writes online about her life and experiences. If you're interested in seeing the kind of thing she writes, she's on a website called Quora.